Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, I want to take you back to September of 1862 to Albany, New York, where the Albany Normal School is fired up about joining the Union Army. A number of the students are prepared to enlist in a regiment that would become the 44th New York Infantry. The teacher of those students, their math professor, is pictured here. He's Albert Nathaniel Husted, 28 years old, and he decides that he's going with them. And he becomes their first lieutenant, and later on in the war becomes their captain and company commander. This group of students with Husted become the Normal School Company. That's the name they form under. But then they're mustered into federal service as Company E of the 44th New York Infantry. Less than a year later, 9 months later, they find themselves at Gettysburg, Little Round Top, facing off against the oncoming Confederate Army, attempting to roll up the flank and perhaps end the battle. The actions of the 44th, you students of the Civil War know, are well remembered. And if you go to Gettysburg today, you'll see their monuments, their castle-like monument along the ridge of Little Round Top. Husted and a number of his boys survived the battle and went on to fight again another day. Husted survived all of it. And in the regimental history, he tells the story of Little Round Top. And he also talks about a squad from his company that captured 90 Texans. He doesn't say what regiment they were from, but it appears they were from the 4th and 5th Texas Infantry. So I want to read you in his own words. This is Husted's recollection of his experience. And he starts out like this, quote, "Let us now imagine ourselves standing July 2nd, 1863, at high noon on Little Round Top, looking north. 3 miles away lie Gettysburg and Cemetery Hill, the latter now occupied by our shattered forces, so nearly defeated the previous afternoon. A mile or more to the west, running nearly parallel to Cemetery Ridge, is Seminary Ridge, held now by the marshaled forces of the rebel army. Round Top is as yet unoccupied. It is the key to the field of the battle, an ideal field, such as field and such as chance for open field fighting on equal terms as the Army of the Potomac had rarely, if ever before, enjoyed. All the forenoon, our regiments, brigades, and field batteries had been coming up. The 5th Corps, after marching a great part of the preceding 24 hours, arrived at 8 a.m. Next section, titled Up Round Top. Quote, 4 o'clock in the afternoon had come, and still there is no sound of battle. But listen, the 5th Corps bugles are sounding. Our signal men have just reported that 2 columns of Confederate soldiers with banners waving are rapidly marching to seize the coveted position. In a few minutes, 10,000 boys in blue at double quick are hastening to repel the attack. A wide gap intervenes between the left of our troops on Cemetery Ridge and Little Round Top, the objective of both forces. When it is filled, only the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Division, 4 small regiments numbering scarcely 1,200 rifles remain. Only 1,200, but they are all men volunteers, everyone. Not a bounty man or a conscript among them. They were veterans, too. They had fought under McClellan on the peninsula and at Antietam, under Burnside at Fredericksburg, and under Hooker at Chancellorsville. Right well they knew that a great crisis, not only in the history of our nation, but also in the history of the world, was at hand. There was the 20th Maine, hardy woodsmen from way down east, the 16th Michigan, their worthy companions, the 83rd Pennsylvania, whose roster of fell in battle, 282 names, was exceeded by but one of all the hundreds of regiments that followed the Stars and Stripes. There, too, was the 44th New York, picked men from the Empire State, a regiment classed with the 300 fighting regiments of the war. They are the men whose task it is to seize and hold that hill, and they are not too late. They gain the summit 10 minutes in advance of the rebel line. Next section. Final section here. Took 90 prisoners. A letter, he starts, which I wrote a few days before the battle, says Company E, the Normal School Company, took 90 prisoners, which was nearly 3 times the number of muskets it carried. You naturally inquire as to how it came to pass that so many brave Texans could be gobbled up by so small a force of Yanks. Well, this is the way it happened. Our men were somewhat protected by large rocks and boulders, and not far in front of the Union line were other rocks and boulders which afforded considerable protection for the advancing foe, but from which it was very dangerous to retire when the main line retreated. Grasping the situation, some half-dozen men, led by First Sergeant Willett, sprang forward and received the surrender of the 90 Texans who found themselves caught as in a trap. I know that the prisoners numbered at least 90, for I counted them myself. One of them did me a great favor, for which I fear I did not thank him, but for which I have always been profoundly grateful. He stood directly in front of me, begging me not to shoot him, when a bullet from the musket of a brother Texan entered his back. Probably he saved my life, or at least protected me from a severe wound. I commanded a little squad which conducted the prisoners to the rear. While I was gone, another line of battle was seen to be approaching, and my company changed its position a little. When I returned, I went directly to our first position, judging from appearances that the boys were lying close, when, to my astonishment, I saw that these men were either all dead or severely wounded. The new rebel line did not closely approach, fired but little, and soon withdrew. Then we went forward to view the work we had done. Our first volley, fired at close range, as they came into view at the brow of a sharp declivity, was very destructive. The dead lay all about, some in groups of a half-dozen or more. The failure of Pickett's desperate charge on our center the following day is a matter of history. Lee's retreat was begun on July 4th. By the morning of July 5th, he was far away through a mountain gap. On July 5th, I was over a considerable portion of the field, which presented a most horrible sight. Literally square miles of the dead lying flat on their backs, as they had lain for 2 or 3 days under a July sun. He concludes, both armies fought at Gettysburg as probably they had never fought before. The Confederates, flushed with the series of victories to their credit and further encouraged by the draft riots in our northern cities, were confident of success. The Unionists had a deep feeling that they were there to do and die, if need be, in defense of their homes in the free states, now invaded by the boastful Southron. General Meade had been severely criticized by the generals of both armies for not ordering a countercharge when Pickett was so disastrously defeated. Had Grant or Sherman been commanding, that countercharge would probably have been made, but the possible result of routing the rebel forces. I am not, however, altogether in sympathy with these criticisms. It is easy to prophesy after the event. General Meade doubtless knew better than anyone else how narrowly his army escaped defeat on the nights of both July 1 and July 2. So there you have it. The reflections of Albert Husted, Company E, 44th, New York Infantry, first lieutenant, later captain, survived the war. He and a bunch of his boys went on to do their part for the Union. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.